All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody. I'll kick off with a brief introduction. My name's Jeff Duncan, and I'm one of the founders of Prosful. And today we're going to be talking about alternative careers with an engineering degree. Now, this topic is actually one I've been looking forward to as someone who studied engineering and as someone who kind of got 2/3 of the way through my degree and realized that, actually, I don't think I want to be doing civil engineering for the rest of my life. And so I was kind of left with the conundrum of what do I do now? And it wasn't really obvious. And, now that I'm working at Prosful and we have a mission at Prosful to help every student get the best possible start to their career, this, decision-making process for students in that situation, I've got this engineering degree and I'm not 100% committed to being a specialist in that field, feels like something that's really important for us to help students work their way through. So before we jump in and I introduce our speakers or our guest today, I'll just quickly define what it is that we mean by alternative careers with an engineering degree. Now, I studied civil engineering, and so for me, whenever I thought about careers or whenever I heard from lecturers at uni, saw presentations, whatever it was, we tended to have the blinkers on and think about careers in terms of being a specialist and typically a civil engineering consultant or in a civil engineering firm. That was where all the focus was. So naturally enough, most engineers tend to gravitate towards, and we've got it separated out by sector here, by engineering consulting firms. Mining, oil and gas is another obvious one. You can understand if you've done an engineering degree why a lot of mining, oil and gas companies hire engineers and why you'd end up as a specialist. Similar for construction and property, R&D and manufacturing. They're all pretty obvious career pathways for engineering students. But then you've got this long tail, this bucket of all other sectors that a lot of the times just aren't on your radar as an engineering student. It was certainly the case for me. Technology firms, so your Googles, your Telstras of the world, somewhat obvious, but you certainly wouldn't be talking about it a lot with your lecturers. Energy and utilities, government and public service, management consulting is where I ended up going. Very popular, or rather, management consulting firms love hiring engineers. And then banking, financial services, and we've got very, very lucky to have a guest today who can talk more about this career path. Accounting and advisory is in there as well. Retail, education and training, and we've got Nick on the call who can talk us through some career paths there, and transport and logistics. So all said and done, even though individually these career paths are small, it ends up accounting for about 1/3 of career paths for students with an engineering degree. And so today, what I want to explore with our guests is two of these non-traditional alternative career paths, banking and financial services, or more specifically trading, and education and training. So with that said, I'm really excited to be able to introduce Rebecca from Tibra Capital and Nick from Teach for Australia. So maybe I can hand over to you, Rebecca and Nick, and spend a moment introducing yourself and giving a little bit of background on Tibra and Teach for Australia, respectively.
Sure, thanks very much, Jeff. So I'm Rebecca. I'm the head of people and strategy at Tibra Capital. Tibra Capital is a proprietary trading firm. So what that means is that we trade our own capital. So we don't have customers or clients. That's the proprietary part of it. And from a trading perspective, we trade globally. We trade all financial markets, all asset classes, all time horizons. So from as little as picoseconds, nanoseconds, right up to sort of daily or weekly type trades. And I guess a little bit about Tibra Capital. So we're a relatively small company of about 130 30 people. We are global though, so we have offices in London, Hong Kong, and Australia. And really, I guess what we're looking for in all of our people is people who love challenges and problem solving. So that's a really key part of the types of people who enjoy being in trading. But I'll talk a bit more about that as we go.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Nick, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself and speak for a moment about Teach for Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to Jeff and Prosper for having us today. And hello to everyone on the call all around Australia as well. So my name's Nick. I'm the recruitment team manager at Teach for Australia. What we do at Teach for Australia is we try to grow a community of leaders committed to equity for children. And we do that by recruiting and developing exceptional people to teach and lead across Australia. So essentially, what our program is you work as a teacher with full salary and benefits, whilst also studying a master's degree and receiving context-specific one-on-one coaching and mentoring. So I used to, similar to Jeff, I used to be a lawyer and I didn't like it at all. It didn't feel particularly purposeful to me. So I was looking for something with a little bit more, where there was a positive human contribution to be making to society. So that's what we do at Teach for Australia, is try to bring people with a degree into the teaching profession, straight into the classroom and doing a master's concurrently.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Super interesting. So, I guess if we can jump into the questions, the first thing I'd like to ask is, why do you both hire engineers? And for the engineering students that have joined us, I'd really encourage you to listen carefully to these answers, because if you take notes, what you can do here is use these tips from Rebecca and Nick to kind of reverse engineer your application and interview responses if you're thinking about going into a non-traditional alternative career. It can be a little difficult as an engineer, thinking about how do I answer questions about why I'm suited to this career, what makes me a good fit, etc., etc. If I don't have what appears an obviously relevant background. So listen to the responses you're about to hear here and see if there isn't something we can learn and take away in terms of the application process. Anyway, can I start with you, Rebecca? Why does TIBRA hire engineers?
Engineers, yeah. So particularly into our grad pipeline, we look at all different backgrounds. You may think traditionally trading should be finance, mathematical type backgrounds. Probably something I didn't mention before, but TIBRA is a quantitative trading firm. That means all of the trading we do is algorithmic. We don't have a lot of manual traders, so there's not a lot of people, clicking buttons and talking to brokers. It's all through computer programming and writing algorithms. And so we do look at all sorts of backgrounds. We look at people who've got maths backgrounds, finance backgrounds, computer science backgrounds, but also engineers. And we've really tapped into the engineer market in the last few years. And the reason we found engineers a good fit for us is because they always know how to apply any kind of theory in a very practical way. So sometimes we find that sometimes math students can be a bit academic, or they have lots of great theory, but they don't understand the practical application of that. And whilst having great theories could write good theoretical trading algorithms, you really need to be able to apply that practically to the market and what's happening around you in the market, and what are the different considerations around technical delivery of a trade. So is it fast enough? How is the computer software and hardware and all the connections to the exchanges factoring into the success of a trade? And so theoretical application of math ideas doesn't always generate the best outcome. It can be a great idea, but you have to really be able to apply that practical knowledge. And we've found with engineers that that's just something that engineers are great at. Everything you do in engineering is often very practical and tangible, and you know how to apply that theory. So we've had a lot of success with different types of engineering backgrounds, and it's something that we've certainly opened up to in the last few years. I think also, so the key things, as I've mentioned, maths and computer programming are really key as foundations for trading, and particularly algorithmic trading. But essentially what trading is problem solving every day. You've got a new market every day, you've got new competition every day, you're competing globally, and so you have to be able to adapt and learn, and logical application and logical thinking and problem solving is probably one of the absolutely critical parts of a successful trader. And so that's where we really like the application of engineering degrees. And yeah, I think it's opened up our pipeline a lot to different types of students, and we believe that anyone can learn how to trade, and we're happy to teach people to do that. It's really about having the right sort of way of thinking about the world and problem solving that can be the difference between a great trader and an academic or theoretical one.
Very interesting. And Rebecca, do you tend to gravitate towards certain engineering disciplines, or do you keep it more broad?
Very broad. So we're pretty we're not narrow in what we look for in students. We don't actually use the degree as a prerequisite, but we do target certain areas because we know that they typically do well with us. And so we've had chemical engineers, we've had electrical engineers, yeah, all sorts. So it's definitely not one particular area.
Very interesting. Thanks for that, Rebecca. And if I can pass over to you, Nick, talk us through from your perspective, or from Teach for Australia's perspective, why it is that you'd want to hire engineers.
So the reason Teach for Australia exists is that there is an education gap in Australia. So students from low socioeconomic areas tend to be a number of years behind their peers in more affluent areas. So that is particularly acute in regional and remote areas. And what we know in Australia is that student performance has been declining, with students now nearly a year behind in science, maths and reading compared to 10 years ago. Part of the reason for this is that there is a lack of qualified teachers in low socioeconomic areas. So engineers are qualified to teach usually in maths and or physics, which are the most in-demand areas, but also the hardest to fill in low socioeconomic areas. So we find our solution to this is to, like I said at the start, pay people to study a master's degree whilst they're teaching simultaneously in an area which most engineers are passionate about, which is STEM, which is maths, which is physics, and bringing their interests into the classroom, sharing that with the students, and to not just to close the education gap, but to share their passions and get the next generation into STEM education as well.
That's super interesting, Nick. And I imagine it sounds like your program at Teach for Australia would be open to all engineers as well?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So I used to be a teacher coach, so I used to watch a lot of teachers around Australia, and some people who have a background in engineering make for excellent teachers. And I don't know if too many engineers think I could do this, but it is a legitimate pathway, and your skill set is 100% needed in the communities that need you most.
Yeah, that's really encouraging to hear. And I mean, I guess at both TIBRA and Teach for Australia, what we're hearing is that rather than your engineering degree setting you back when you're looking at careers outside of engineering, you know, you're kind of starting from a disadvantage. It's actually a really strong differentiator. You know, we're talking about bringing a skill set that is in demand, structured problem solving, analytical approach to, you know, very difficult problems in the case of TIBRA. And, you know, this is some really interesting stuff here.
Yeah, the one thing that's probably underrated in teaching is the academic challenge of it. It's looking at a class, looking at their results, putting a plan in place to close that education gap, It's got the people aspect of it, but it's a really good academic challenge as well.
Yeah, it's a good point, Nick. And that's obviously the academic side of things is going to be a big skill gap for most people coming out of a straight engineering degree. But, your program would cover that, I imagine, in the training as part of the master's course.
Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. So I guess that's a good start, right? So clearly we don't need to be scared by these alternative career paths. If anything, it's a straight up advantage. I guess the next question is like, okay, so it sounds interesting. You've piqued my interest as an engineering student, but let's get more into the detail. What am I actually going to be doing day to day? As a civil engineering student, as a mechanical engineering student, if you go down the traditional career path and become a civil engineer, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to be doing because I've been, at the coalface doing fairly relevant tasks and projects for the last handful of years at uni. But trading or teaching day to day, it's a bit of a black box. So let's jump into that and explore that. Rebecca, do you want to kick us off and sort of talk us through the real nitty gritty, the specifics?
Sure. So yeah, we start off with essentially a 12-month grad training program, which is designed to give you all the skills you need to be a successful trader. And there's a lot of different elements to that. So as I mentioned, computer programming is really critical. And so we start off with giving you a foundation in C++. Predominantly, you also need to do Python down the track. So it's not a prerequisite to come in with that, but it is definitely an expectation that you can upskill in that area to a certain degree. We then also teach you about quant and market fundamentals. So what that looks like is understanding how you apply mathematical methodology to trading problems, and also understanding what are the things that impact a trade in the market. So when I talk about market fundamentals, I'm talking about understanding how global macro trends may impact what's going on in the markets, or how to understand the different asset classes. So what's a bond, or what's a future, or what's an option? And so there's a lot of, in the first 6 months, of practical learning, I guess, about the different elements of being a trader. And so you are doing real life tasks throughout all of that. So in the first 3 months where you're upskilling in C++, we have massive code bases, and you really need to be able to understand those and interact with them. So it's about how do we give you tasks that are exposing you to different parts of that code base. And then when you move on to sort of the second and third blocks of training, you start looking at practical trading applications. So we may have a trade that is in place today and it needs refining, or it needs part of it updated from a systems perspective. And so you're in there understanding how that trade's been written. So whoever's written the code for that trade, and then how it executes in the market. So understanding all the components of how it touches all the systems internally at Tibra, but also externally in the market. And as your skill and understanding of that grows, you get more and more independent. And then hopefully by about sort of 12 months, you're really working fully independently, either amending a trade that we already have. So that's looking at, is it operating as efficiently as it could be, doing research, so quantitative research on new signals for that trade, which what I mean by that is looking at different data sets in the market, understanding how they interact with the trade. So a lot of quant analysis and research, I guess. But also there's a unique thing at Tibra where we bring together the quant research side of things, the trading skill and the development skill into one role, which means what you should be able to do is you come up with a trading idea, or you're doing some research and you figure out how to amend a trading strategy to make it better. You can test it yourself through what we call a back test, which is saying, if I deployed this in the market, I can look historically and see how it would have performed, and then actually deploying it into production yourself. And then, literally once you get good, you could literally come up with an idea on a Thursday, do the research over Friday, deploy it into the, deploy it into the market early the following week. And within about a week, you can find out whether the idea you had actually made a difference to a trade in the market and is profitable and makes money. So the main tasks that you're doing is understanding end to end how a trade goes from an idea in someone's head right through to an execution in the market, and all the little components that need to line up around that, and how do you make them as efficient as possible, because particularly in the trading where you start, which is high frequency trading, so that's the super fast stuff. The technology is absolutely critical to make sure that that's successful. So you're really fine tuning lots of different parts of that puzzle, all the way from as I said, the idea, coming up with an idea and then executing that right through to the market.
That's fascinating. And so once I've done this 12 months of kind of fundamentals, C++, Python, market fundamentals, and I'm hopefully starting to get hands-on, as an engineering student, would I tend to be specializing on a particular sector? As in I'm trading, mining stocks, or is it more, how do you do you have a concept of specialization like that?
Yeah, so typically we specialize around the frequency of the trade, if that makes sense. So what we do is most of our grads, we enter into what we call market making, which is where you're buying and selling and around the same thing. And typically we do that around a type of asset class, which is an option, for example. And currently we do that in the Korean markets. So your specialization initially is around that market making and high frequency trading. So by that I mean it's all about the speed. The trades are simpler in that space, but the edge and the ability to make money all comes from the ability to be fast. As you progress in your career, and from a specialization perspective, you'll learn more about different types of asset classes and different products. You may move into different markets. So as I said, at the moment we're really focused on Korea, but sometimes you can do the exact same trade in one market and you tweak it a little bit and it'll work in Japan, for example. So you always start kind of in the simplest part of the business, which is around this, where the ideas are simple but the technology matters. And then over time you sort of grow your skill set and become more knowledgeable about different types of trading and move into different career paths. We do also have the ability to specialize, I guess, by skill set. So if you came in and decided you really enjoyed the dev side of things and it was you were really good at that, and that was what you felt you were going to be most successful at, then there is the opportunity to be doing tasks that are much more dev heavy. Conversely, if you're much better at the quant research side, perhaps you'd specialize a little bit more in quant research. So you'd still be expected to do some dev, and everyone's expected to know a bare minimum in all of the skills, but there is the ability to sort of specialize in a skill set as well.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned, Rebecca, the kind of as you build your skill set, doing the full chain of idea through to execution. Can you also specialize along that chain? Like I'm more of the execution coding end, and I tend to specialize in that. And I may be implementing other people's ideas versus, I'm an ideas person, and I have a knack for the.
Yeah, we do find over time that people, as I said, we most people do everything, but there is if people are better at idea generation, then that's also where we want them spending a lot more of their time. So there is the ability to specialize in that journey. Some other companies, so not Tibra, but other companies actually break that role up and they'll have just idea generators or just implementers or just the hardware side of things. So different trading firms will do that differently, but that is something that we sort of try and fit into one role, so you get the full exposure end to end. But yeah, as I said, within that sort of idea through to execution, there is definitely ability to specialize.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And within, okay, so we kind of, sounds like we primarily divide specialization and teams by trading frequency, if I understood correctly. Within those buckets, how do you, I mean, obviously you'd want to structure the focused some way so that it's not a free-for-all in terms of the initial ideas and everybody ends up focusing on the same thing? Do you tend to steer teams and therefore grads towards particular, starting points for the ideas?
Yeah, not deliberately. It's sort of a bit more organic, I guess, how that plays out. So as I said, we have different products that we trade, and so we might find that different products may have different things that are more important to them, and so we may look at someone's skill set and say, you know, what you're doing, we think you've really understood the trading side well, and that's, you know, more important if you're trading this product, like options, for example. Whereas someone you're much more aware and expert on execution, and that's really important for warrants, for example. So we'll put you there. So we look at your skill set along the way and figure out which team we think you'd be best suited to, and where we think you'll have the best success.
Look, it sounds very interesting. I've got to say, if I'd known about this when I was a grad, for me, I always enjoyed. We did a little bit of C++ and coding, and I really enjoyed that. And I'm an introvert by nature, so I tend to enjoy getting stuck in the detail of things.
We take people at all levels. You could still join us.
Yeah, it's very cool. So hopefully, there's a few people on the call today who this sounds interesting for, because it was a total blind spot for me as a grad. So how about you, Nick? I mean, obviously teaching, we've all been in the classroom at some point in our lives, so we have a little bit more of an idea about what the nuts and bolts of the day in the life of a teacher looks like. But, you know, obviously Teach for Australia is unique in the sense that you've got the initial training program, and, you know, your program participants might be ending up in some unique settings, perhaps. Do you want to talk us through some of the peculiarities of the Teach for Australia program?
Yeah, so we're a 2-year leadership development program. So we're specifically looking to build the next generation of leaders. So our program participants are known as associates. So once you're in the classroom, you're teaching point 8, but you also get point 2, so a full day or 2 half days to study for your master's degree. Part of the difference for Teach for Australia is the support we wrap around our teachers. So there's a sort of 3-pronged approach to the support. One is all our associates get a teaching and leadership advisor. That's essentially a pedagogical and leadership coach who comes and watches them teach in the classroom, then offers them advice on how to improve their practice. There's also an in-school mentor. That's someone employed at the school already who has a time release to mentor our associates. And there's also an academic mentor from our university partner who is there to help you get through the master's degree in teaching that we offer. The master's degree is bespoke to this particular pathway. So our university partner, ACU, works really closely with Teach for Australia, and we've created this specific master's program for this specific pathway. So that's probably some of the more unique elements of the Teach for Australia program in terms of the workload at point 8, but also in terms of the support structures that we wrap around our associates as well.
Very, very interesting. Look, I imagine, I think about the hiring that we're doing and the stuff you mentioned there, Nick, and the stuff that I think you'd learn in a classroom, like the sort of ability to educate and mentor and leadership and multitasking. That's powerful stuff.
Yeah. Our kind of view is that teaching is leadership. If you can successfully teach a class, then that is a proxy for you to take those skills into any other leadership context. After the 2 years of the Teach for Australia program, we don't expect you to stay in the classroom, although you can. And in fact, 75% of our associates do. Over 80% are in education. But you can take that particular skill set and scale it in corporate, government, philanthropy, not-for-profit, or simply supporting your local communities. We hope that people have a lifetime of action towards addressing educational inequality, but the skills that you learn over the 2 years of the program can be used as a leadership model all the way through your life.
Yeah, that was my immediate thought. I mean, you couple, the traditional analytical structured problem solving skill set that, is traditionally associated with engineers with what you described there, that leadership, that mentoring ability. That's powerful stuff. That's the world's your oyster.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And it's a very human profession. So you have to learn to harness a bunch of different personalities to go in the right direction. And we teach you, we'll help you get to that direction, but it will help you be a leader, leading teams, leading schools, if that's your thing. Whatever you want to do, it will provide a pathway for you to do that in the future.
Yes, that's great. And I guess that's a nice segue into the next question. We'll stay with you, Nick, for this one. Career progression. So you mentioned that 75% end up staying in teaching?
Yeah, that's right. So it's around 75% of our alumni remain in the classroom, and it's about 83% overall that are either teaching or in education fields. So that would include someone like me who continues to work in education for Teach for Australia or at the Department of Education or various think tanks, education related. But we also have other alumni and associates who go on to do other things, whether it's further study, whether it's going back into engineering and then coming back into teaching. So, it's kind of a pathway that opens up a lot of doors depending on where you want to go.
Yeah, it feels like gives you a lot of optionality.
100%. Yeah.
And like I said, combining the soft skills that would be a big focus with your training program with the traditional engineering, technical and hard skills. It's I can just see that being sought after by a lot of different employers in a lot of different sectors. So
yeah,
it feels like a very if you kind of on the fence about teaching as a long-term career, it sounds like first of all a lot of the people end up staying in, so that's a really good sign. But it feels like a no regrets option if you end up not sticking with it, but you've got this powerful soft skill plus hard skill set.
Yeah, and we've got alumni who have, as graduates, have done the 2-year leadership development program with us, then have gone on to work in consulting with one of the big 4 consulting firms and learned a further set of skills, then come back into education to apply what they've learned in TFA and the consulting firms. And they're really solving some big ingrained problems in this country with respect to educational inequality. So being able to, we all know that grads and, Jeff, you and I seem like we're pretty similar. People drift in and out of careers, but it's what you learn along the way that you can then deploy to solve what you want to solve.
Yeah, it's spot on. Very interesting. Thanks, Nick. And how about career progression in the trading Tibra Capital pathway, Rebecca?
Yeah, sure. So as I sort of said earlier, we tend to start people in that high frequency trading, the really fast technology driven trading. And the reason we do that is because often the graduates coming out of university are up to date with the latest tech. They're more advanced in the different technologies and approaches we can use to really leverage, I guess, latency for financial success. As you grow older and get more experience, probably the skills that grow more and are more valuable is around the trading side of things, and that then sort of lends itself to a different style of trading. So less reliant on tech, less reliant on latency, but more reliant on the quality of the idea that's being generated. So in trading talk, that's called the alpha. And so what we tend to find at Tibra is people stay for probably anywhere from 3 to 5 years in market making, which is where the high frequency, high tech trading exists, and then they can move into some of our other desks. So we have other trading styles at Tibra, which we call alpha style trading desks, that do sort of have a different skill set, and so it is more angled towards that trading style of things. You still need to have dev skills, you still need to do quant research, etc. But it is a different style of trading. And so typically the people with us who've had sort of 10 plus year careers with us have done that journey. They've started with 3 to 5 years in market making, and then as they've gotten more experienced and want to move into looking at different styles of trading, then they can move into a different desk. Even once you're in one of those desks, there's the ability to move around to different styles of trading, so different asset classes or different types of trading as well. And I could get into lots of jargon, but it won't mean anything to anyone. But there are different styles of trading you can do. So typically it's more about moving around the organisation and broadening your skill set into different areas and learning different things from different markets, different asset classes, different styles of trading, whether it be high frequency or low frequency. And that is sort of how you build your career. We in particular are quite a small company, so we have a very flat structure. So we don't like to have lots of hierarchy in our structure, which means that there is some opportunity for progressing upwards into leadership roles. They absolutely exist, but more often than not in our company, it's about broadening your skill set and learning about different things and, taking on different styles of trading. I think in trading in general, some companies are only market making firms, and so that's one style of trading. Other companies are just hedge funds, which is a different style of trading. And so really, I think in trading as a career, thinking about the style of trading that you enjoy and which companies are going to do that. And some companies like us do both. And so it just gives you that different option.
Very interesting. So it sounds like you're very much looking at any point in the career, you want individual contributors, people who are hands-on, doing the trades.
Yep, even our senior leaders, our managing director is still very hands-on, and I think that's something that's quite typical in trading, is that you stay on the tools. We don't have a lot of leadership positions that are predominantly people leadership or strategy leadership without being on the tools. I think that's, we take a very practical hands-on approach all the way through career progression.
Yeah, that's great. Good to know. Beautiful. Okay. So I guess the next one is, like we've talked about some really interesting stuff. No doubt we've got a bunch of listeners who are kind of keen to learn about next steps. Do you have any advice for engineers? Because, obviously we've already talked about engineers. They do have something unique to offer. They do have, some kind of competitive advantage, but there's still blind spots. And so do you have any tips for engineers who might be applying at your respective firms? How about I'll start with you, Nick?
Yeah. So at Teach for Australia, we don't have a cap on the amount of people who can join our program. If you meet our competencies, you will get in. So we have 8 competencies we look for, which indicate that you're a good fit for our program. Now, I manage a team of recruitment and advocacy managers, and they want to help you through the recruitment process. That's what they're there for, is to guide you through that. So my best advice, if this is a pathway you're interested in, is come to one of our events. Next week, we've got an information session on Tuesday night. We've got an application workshop on Wednesday night. We've got an alumni Q&A on Thursday night. Or complete an expression of interest on our website, which is teachforaustralia.org. And one of our recruitment and advocacy managers will get in touch with you. They will talk to you. They will help you understand what we're looking for through the application process. So the best piece of advice that I have is to please talk to someone from Teach for Australia before you put an application in. They will get to know you. They're happy to answer any questions, but they will also give you an idea of what we're looking for through the recruitment process.
Thanks, Nick. Are you able to share any more detail on? You mentioned 8 skill sets. Is that something that is able to be shared in advance, or is that kind of secret sauce?
No, not at all. No, we're really upfront about the four skills and 4 mindsets that we look for in the program. So we look for things like, in terms of mindsets, we want people who are reflective, who are able to reflect on what they're doing well and what they can improve. We want people to have a commitment to our mission, which is addressing educational disadvantage. We want people who are resilient, who have humility. And then we look for 4 skills in particular. One is communicating and influencing ability. The second is leadership, as in leadership potential, organization and planning ability, and also problem solving. So they're the 8 competencies we look for, and that's what our team exists for, to help you through understanding specifically what we're looking for under those 8 competencies.
Yeah, beautiful. So I imagine the problem solving is probably going to be a relative strength for most engineers, but in terms of the other stuff, the comms and the leadership, do you have any advice there? Is there any stuff that you'd be looking for that engineering students can be cognizant of going into these discussions in the application process?
Yeah. So when we look for leadership, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have held a leadership position. You don't have to have been the president of the student club of your college or the head of the science society or whatever it is. Leadership is a mindset, and it's a set of practices. So how have you contributed positively to your community, your university, your society? What positive contributions have you made that indicate that you have the potential to be a leader in the future? And we're also looking for, in terms of communication, remember that sometimes you're teaching kids from 12 years old to 18 years old. So can, for example, you communicate mathematical concepts to a 12-year-old? That's some of the things we'd be looking for.
Yeah, brilliant. And the mission strikes me as something that, we'll put it this way. As an engineer, one of the things that didn't appeal to me was a life of specializing in bitumen, or whatever it might be. So, that mission you talked about, for those who, are in the position that I was, are kind of questioning, is this the specialization? Is this the impact I want my career to have? That sounds like something that's really worth some serious thought.
Totally. And I had the same thing when I was a lawyer, which was, am I really going to spend 40 years doing this? So yeah, what we really want when we say commitment to mission is, do you have an understanding of educational inequity in Australia, that the problem exists, and do you want to do something about it? And when the going gets tough in the program, what is it? Can you remember why you're doing it? Which is to bring the next generation of students up to the level they need to be at, and really propel them into a career in STEM, because we know that STEM careers are going to be so prevalent in the future. And we don't have the students coming through with that passion for STEM that we need. And the people with the engineering backgrounds that we're looking for can really provide that spark in the classroom.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff. So some really good tips there for anyone who's thinking about jumping in and applying for Teacher Australia. Before I hand over to you, Rebecca, I'll just remind viewers that if you have any questions, drop them in the comments or the chat, and we'll try and get to them in a minute or two. Yeah, Rebecca, do you have any tips for engineering students who are thinking about applying?
Yeah, certainly. So I think there's a couple of things, and I know there's a question in the chat about internships. So we do run internships, and I think they're an excellent way of really understanding what the role is about, whether you'll be suited to it. So we take people in their penultimate and ultimate years of study for those, and a lot of other trading firms do as well. So I definitely recommend looking at internships to really understand what trading's all about. Is it the right fit for you? Getting into trading can be really tough. So we take 5,000 applications a year globally at the moment, and we take about 15 applicants, so less than 0.5% of people who apply get through. So it is incredibly competitive. The skills and capabilities that we look for in that recruitment process are general aptitude. So there is an aptitude test to sort of look at your general cognitive ability and ability to apply that to complex questions. We do look at some behavioural traits as well. So trading, I guess you have to have a risk appetite to even get into trading. There is risk involved in what you're doing, and you need to be comfortable with that risk. So it's different in quant trading. It may feel a bit more removed from what it used to when you were manually click trading, but there is still obviously you're taking people's money and investing it and trying not to lose it. So there is definitely an element of you need to enjoy that kind of competitiveness and risk element of it, and that's something that we look for. I've also mentioned a few times around coding ability. So, as I said, everyone needs to be able to translate their ideas into a code, an algorithmic trade, which is written in code. So, our low latency stuff is done in C++. Some of our other coding is done in Python. And having a minimum level of that before you apply is definitely a recommendation. So there's lots of courses out there you can take. We obviously upskill in that area as well, but we do a coding test before you join, which you can choose which language you do it in. But definitely having a minimum level of coding is a prerequisite. So if you're interested in trading, you think your coding's a little bit rough, I would recommend going out and reading some books, taking some courses, having a look at Udemy or Coursera. The other thing I think is really useful that you can do is try and do some trading, whether it be starting off a little bit manual and or looking at some of the algorithmic trading platforms that are out there, like a Quant Connect, for example. You can, if you have a look at them, they provide platforms where you can deploy trading ideas and back test them and that type of thing. So I guess that's a really simple way to try it out and see whether it excites you and motivates you, knowing, looking at the markets every day, or whether it's something that scares you. So yeah, those things are always useful and practical ways to expand your knowledge.
Very interesting. Is there any particular courses that you recommend in terms of touching up on the coding skills before applying?
No, we do send some out to our guys even when we've hired them, and then before they start. They're typically Coursera ones. There is a PyCharmers course out there that actually we've sponsored with someone else that you could have a look at. That's more Python based though. And then I'm trying to think of the other one. But yeah, Coursera is typically where we look for some of the particularly coding type classes, so C++ or Python.
Awesome. That's good to know. And you mentioned sort of the risk appetite and the competitiveness. If I'm an engineering student thinking about this and I don't know a whole lot about financial markets and trading, how would I know if this is something that might be a fit for me? What sort of stuff are you looking for?
So in our interviews, we always ask about, have you played competitive sport and how do you approach competition? So for us, it's not so much about competing with your peers. It's not about, I want to beat the person next to me. What you want to do is beat the market in general. And so, and it is every day you're trying to figure out how you get that edge and how you get a trade ahead of the competitors that you're up against, which is every other trading firm and even retail traders globally. So I think if you're motivated by being the best, if you're motivated by really pushing yourself, finding the next best thing and being ahead of the competition, that's something that's going to naturally make you a good fit for trading. If you're not uber competitive, it might not be the right industry for you because it is hard and it's tough and every day is a competition. So it's not like it's not like a sport where you've got a bit of preseason and then you've got the season and then you've got the finals and you can kind of peak and trough over the course of a year. This is sort of every day the markets are competitive. So typically we find people who love that kind of energy, the pace, competition, and want to be the best really thrive in this type of environment.
Got it. So it's not necessarily that I have to have a demonstrated track record of taking risk in my own trading or whatever it might be. It can be broader than that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
It's more a disposition for that, and agreeing, thinking about the way you approach things in life and whether that's kind of your mindset.
Totally. And I guess the other blind spot or area that might be a bit of an insecurity for engineers is the financial markets. You mentioned that you cover that in the initial training, which is great to hear, but is that something that you are looking at? Are you testing that somehow in the application process? And if so, is there anything I can do to prepare as an engineering student?
Yeah, we don't test for it. Certainly in the initial application process, we don't test for it. When we get into the interview stage, we have a dev interview and a quant interview, but they're more about problem solving. I guess we'd probably expect if you've got an interest in trading, you're probably a little bit familiar with the markets. You might be reading what's going on in the financial news, understanding the impact of, at the moment, there's so much going on with interest rates and inflation, and having a bit of an interest in, well, what does that mean for markets? What do we think? How would those indicators impact stock prices, for example? And because whilst we're not manually trading, it's those types of things that you do build into algorithms. So if there's a change in an interest rate, you predict what impact that's going to have on different types of instruments in the market or a stock price, for example. So I think having a general interest in that is definitely, it's not something we test for, but I would definitely recommend reading up on those markets, seeing if it interests you. We sort of train you in the really intricate detail that you'd need to know from a financial markets perspective.
Got it. Very interesting. And with this, financial side of things, is this the sort of thing you can learn in a short course, or is it more just you have to be genuinely interested in it and have a curiosity?
I think curiosity is the best way. Like you can learn it, but if you're not curious about it, you're not going to go to the level of questioning that you need to do to be successful at it. I think some of our values are around diligence and in innovation, and thinking about, when you asking why to absolutely everything. Why did that happen, and why did that happen? And if you don't understand that, then what's the next level? And that, I think, comes from a natural curiosity about things, because you need to, particularly with trading, it's really important to understand why things are happening and not just that they're happening. So if you want to be able to predict things and understand whether it's going to be a continuing trend, then understanding the why is really important.
Yeah, very interesting. And we had a question here about the internships. You mentioned Tibra does offer internships.
Yep.
Do you tend to hire grads from the internship program? Is that kind of a natural starting point?
Yeah, often we do. We really enjoy hiring interns, converting interns into grads, because I think we know you've had a chance to see if this is the right career path for you, and we've obviously had a good opportunity to observe your skills. And it's it's a bit of an elongated interview process, really. But I think the most valuable part of internships is figuring out for the individual whether this is the right industry for you. It's hard to do that when, hearing a talk from me is great and it might pique your interest, but it's hard to know if you want to do that every day. And an internship is absolutely the best way to get more exposure to that and figure it out.
Beautiful. And on that note, when do application? I imagine internships are the next set of opportunities that are opening at Tibra. If I'm interested as a student, what's the next step?
Yeah, so for grad roles, we accept applications 365 days a year. So they're always open. Internships, we are running a summer internship at the end of this year. So, and I'm just checking, I think applications are open now for that. And if they're not, they'll be open very soon. And that will be to do a stint over sort of the December, January timeframe.
Beautiful. So if you're a final year student, you probably want to apply for a grad program, and anything else, you've got a really exciting opportunity to test the waters with an internship.
Correct. Yeah, and we have we've got a grad actually starting in September who's completed 3 internships with us already, and decided that they really love this, and so have kept coming back really, and now they're starting as a graduate with us in September, which will give them a massive head start as well in terms of the program. So yeah, I'm just checking our internship application is open now. So tibra.com, you'll be able to find that.
There you go. Beautiful. There's the next step. And how about Teach for Australia, Nick? Is there anything there in terms of internships, or are you specifically looking for people who've got an undergraduate degree already?
No, we offer a virtual internship, which is housed on Forage, which will give you a good insight into what it's like being in the Teach for Australia. We also have what's called the Step Up program for penultimate year students later in the year, which is the last few years have been virtual because of COVID, but we hope it's essentially a school taster experience. So we hope to be able to do that later this year, where we get a small group of people to go into a school and experience what it's like being part of the program. If you are a final year student, our round 2 applications close on Sunday, June 19. So we progressively close learning areas as we meet demand. So my recommendation, if you're interested, is to get your application in on or before Sunday, June 19. And the other thing is, the sooner you put an application in, the sooner we can match you to a school that needs someone with your skill set.
Beautiful. There you go. So for those watching live, we've got 10 days to put in that application. And that's a really good tip. If you're kind of wondering about, the nuts and bolts of this, the virtual internship sounds like a really good way to test it out.
Yep, 100%.
And that was on forage.com, yeah?
Yes, correct.
The forage.com. Excellent. Thanks, guys. I think that was really interesting. 2 very different career paths, obviously. And, I imagine for a lot of engineers, totally off the radar. But as you've heard, some very, very interesting career options. So I'd encourage you to go ahead with those next steps if it's at all interesting. In the case of Tibra, we've got the internship, or if you're final year, you can jump in and apply for the grad program right throughout the year. And Teach for Australia, anytime you can do the virtual internship, and anytime before, was it 19th of June? We've got the application.
Yes, 19th of June, our round 2 applications will close. Round 3 will open sometime towards the end of June, but our recommendation is to get the application in for round 2, just to get things moving along for you.
Beautiful. There we go. Thank you, guys. That was really interesting. Appreciate your time. We'll keep an eye on the comments on the socials, and if anything, any follow-up questions are there, I'd love to do another call to make sure we answer all the questions that students have. But thank you very much, guys. That was really interesting.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
Yep, thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for joining us online.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.